David Bruckner, director of The Ritual and The Night House, two standout films from the last few years, did the impossible and brought back to life a dead, deflated franchise in Hellraiser, a franchise that's been arguably on life support since after the second film, and brought it back here in one of the most sublime reinventions I've seen in a very long time. Strap in, kids.
We have such sights to show you.
Hellraiser 2022 is breathtaking, and I say that as a fan of the original novella, The Hellbound Heart, as well as the Hellraiser franchise at large, even if the films themselves I don't particularly like after the second one. That's right, Hellraiser 3 apologists, come at me. I think that 2022's Hellraiser did beautiful justice to Clive Barker's original vision of Hell and the Cenobites, as well as the themes of the story as a whole. Hellraiser tells the story of Riley, an addict who comes into possession of a mysterious puzzle box, and upon starting to solve it, finds herself and her friends in a horrifying game against extra-dimensional pleasure seekers called Cenobites, led by Jamie Clayton's Pinhead, or the Hell Priest, as she's called in this movie. I had so much riding on this. This is one of my most hyped movies of the year. The Hellbound Heart has always been one of my favorite works of Clive Barker's, and I've always been dying to see a more faithful adaptation of it on screen. Not that the original film isn't a good movie. It's great. I love the 1987 Hellraiser. But the Hellbound Heart is a very different kind of story, and the Cenobites are presented very differently. We didn't get a more faithful adaptation here, but what we did get was something a little bit cooler, in my opinion, which is less of a remake of Hellraiser, less of a readaptation of the Hellbound Heart, and more of a reimagining / reboot of Hellbound Hellraiser 2, and honestly, I think it's all the better for that. I always adored Hellbound. I thought it was a fantastic follow-up, and even though the film itself is a bit choppy due to massive chunks of it being left on the cutting room floor, there's this grand scope to it and a high-concept horror fantasy element to it. And the way that it explores the Cenobites' hell dimension and the mythology surrounding their god, Leviathan, a big floating rhombus in the sky, was always so cool to me. I loved things with deep lore, and Hellraiser has some really rich, deep lore. And this new Hellraiser not only explores that lore in depth, it expands upon it and changes it in interesting ways that never stray from the core themes of Hellraiser, even though they do change the nature of the game a bit. But at its core, Hellraiser has always been about grotesque imagery presented in such a way that makes it stunning and you can't look away. It combines taboo and horrific imagery with stunning music and beautiful shot composition, big dramatic orchestral swells as you're watching somebody reconstitute from, like, blood and cum on the floor. And this movie does a lot similarly, and then some, presenting some shots here that are some of the most stunning in any Hellraiser film to date. And as we descend down the rabbit hole into Hell now, I will start going into a little more detail. I'll avoid spoilers until the end, and I'll warn you before that happens. But if you want to go in completely, totally blind, knowing nothing about it, why are you watching this video, first of all? But second, go do it. It's on Hulu. You have no excuse. This movie should have been in a theater. There is no reason it shouldn't have been. This and Prey both are phenomenal. These are like movies, and they're on Hulu. Why are these not being put on big screens? I will start with the negatives just to kind of get them out of the way, because I have far more to gush about this movie than I do to complain about. First off, the movie does clock in at about an hour 50 minutes without credits. It is a little bit too long. There's about 10 to 15 minutes or so in the second act that I think personally could be cut to make it a little more streamlined. It's a slow burn film. It's a dramatic character piece. It's not a high-octane horror film, and it's not supposed to be. That's not ever what Hellraiser was. The characters outside of Riley are pretty thin. Their performances are all range from, like, fine to decently good, and they all serve their purposes, but it's evident that for the most part, they're all just there to be Cenobite cannon fodder, and that's fine. I don't have an issue with that, because this is ultimately Riley's story through and through, and as far as her character and her character arc, it does deliver. The main issue I have, and the main issue I've seen a lot of people complain about, is that the plot here is a little bit too thin, where the original Hellraiser is fairly light on plot as well, being a pretty simple story that was once jokingly summarized by a PA as what a woman will do for a good fuck. The 87 film was centered more around the absolutely fascinating, twisted, and throwing one out to my monster fuckers here, sexy romance between Julia and the resurrected skinless Frank Cotton. This film doesn't really have that kind of a lust-fueled toxicity, and the sexual dynamics of the movie overall are toned down in favor of a broader story about addiction and dominance and pleasure-seeking without limits. Basically, what I'm saying is, my biggest complaint is that this movie could have been and probably should have been hornier. But now to address the good, there's a lot of it. Like I said, this movie is gorgeous. The effects are almost entirely practical, and the cinematography presenting it all is sublime. The imagery, especially once we start descending into hell, is truly stunning, and it drives me nuts that I will not get to see this on a theater screen. David Bruckner was a fantastic pick to tackle this franchise. He makes amazing use of the tricks he used in the Night House to work with the warping architecture of the house, to work with the warping architecture of hell in this movie, and it excels. It's so cool. There's a scene in a van that I don't want to spoil, but oh my god, the imagery there is terrifying, conceptually and visually. The lighting, once they are in the Cenobites world, is similarly beautiful, with these ghostly, cascading white ripples that spill all over the walls and reflect off the Cenobites themselves in a way that makes them look almost like ghostly and glowing and otherworldly. Shout out to Ben Lovett, the composer, for incorporating so much of Christopher Young's original score from the first two films. The choices of the old music and when it hits are excellently placed, and it makes use of Second Sight Seance from Hellbound Hellraiser 2, which is one of my favorite horror movie scores of all time. This Hellraiser opts to trade in the aforementioned character dynamics for world building and lore, and Riley as our lead vessel to learn about the box and the Cenobites and Leviathan itself. And Bruckner takes us down this wild, stunning, grotesque rabbit hole and entices us to want to know more about all the sights that Leviathan and the Cenobites have to offer. And speaking of the Cenobites, let's start by talking about the priest, Jamie Clayton, as Pinhead. Oh my god. A performance worthy of making Doug Bradley blush, if we're being honest. I was honestly originally standing for Tilda Swinton to play Pinhead in a remake because I always wanted them to go the androgynous route of the novel, but I can't imagine anyone doing it more justice than Jamie Clayton did here. Everything about her performance was breathtaking. She embodies the very essence of how the character was described originally. The voice is incredible. It's modulated in such a way that makes it entirely genderless. It's booming and whispery and ethereal all at the same time. But the physicality that she brings to the role is just blew me away. There's this alien stillness to her entire performance. With the exception of walking and like slowly raising and lowering her arms, she's essentially motionless. And when you combine that with the fact that her head is never moving and she's barely, I don't think we ever see her blink on camera, combine all that with the incredible new Cenobite designs as a whole, and you actually understand why the Cenobites could be seen as angels to some people. Their designs overall in this movie are immaculate, and it's certainly a choice to remove the leather entirely since it's such a signature part of the looks in the original films, but these new designs do something that is so twisted and so inventive and so distinct from those leather-clad looks that it makes them feel like they're truly not of this reality. Rather than the traditional leather, the Cenobites are all entirely naked, essentially, but their skin has been like flayed and reconfigured and stretched in such a way to become their new clothing. So there's nothing sexual about these naked forms. They look like they're wearing clothes, but the clothes are their skin. It's grotesque, but it captures that same disgusting glamour of the first film, with their mutilations this time being like shockingly clean and surgical and making them feel like they're ascended beyond humanity altogether. Every design here is unique. They all have similar elements, with their skin being like stripped away strategically and refashioned, and all of them being accented with these pearlescent pins that are all over Pinhead's face and look so stunning because they capture those cascading light effects of hell so well. The gasp this film's version of the female Cenobite,
Save the breath. Full screen.
ugh, the way her design looks is so cool, and like the skin that isn't flayed away is intricately designed with all these like symbols that look like the lament configuration itself. Divine shit. My beautiful boy Chatterer returns here, looking as stunningly disgusting as ever, and I do wish his face was a little more mangled and less like a helmet, but the teeth look great, and we get some real nice close-ups as well as some good action from him, and I am very happy about that. The new Cenobite designs are just as nightmarishly beautiful as the returning ones, with the Asphyx being probably my favorite, and the most unnerving by far, blind and wheezing through a sheet of flesh stretched over and pinned to its face like a freaking Silent Hill nurse. There's the Weeper, who also leaves a great impression, and the notion of both of her arms splitting down the middle is something that we've never really seen before in any Cenobites, and it's still totally in the vein of what you'd expect from Leviathan. There's the Mask, who leaves another great impression and is arguably one of the most unique Cenobite designs we've ever seen in any of the films, but doesn't really get much to do here, which is a shame because he's also one of the few that actually speaks, and I love his design. And then we even get 2 seconds of another Cenobite that's credited as the mother, who appears to be pregnant, and I don't want to even imagine with what, but that's unique. I wish we got to see more of that. I don't know. I'm down for whatever new designs this team wants to throw at us. They're all very, very cool, and I loved every second of it. And up against the Cenobites, you have Riley, played fantastically by Odessa Azion. I don't know how to pronounce her last name, actually, genuinely, and I'm sorry if I fuck that up. Riley isn't particularly likable, but she's not supposed to be. She's a hurricane of a person, and her story is one of learning her lesson. Before she finds the box, she's leeching off her brother. She's doing exclusively what she wants, regardless of what others are begging her to do, and regardless of what is, actually good for her, or how her actions are affecting others. And it's throughout the film that she learns to take accountability for her actions, but in the process loses a lot of the things that are very important to her. And in the end, she's really only left with the crushing guilt of what her actions have wrought. That's the curse of opening the puzzle box. Even in winning, there's no winning. That's why this movie rules. And to delve into that anymore, I would have to go into spoilers, so I'm going to touch on a couple things real quick. If you haven't seen Hellraiser, click away now, watch it, come back, talk about it below. I'm very excited to hear what you think. So in order to go into spoilers, I want to talk a bit about the changing nature of the rules here, especially regarding the puzzle box, which in itself has never looked better with actual moving parts and stunning craftsmanship and the actual functionality to it. It's so cool seeing it turn into these wild and crazy shapes that we've never seen from any of the other films, because outside of 2 or 3 different shapes, we never really saw any, because the puzzle box prop in previous films didn't really move. Like I said, the nature of the box is a bit different this time around, but it works in tandem with the changed nature of the Cenobites themselves, because they themselves are a bit less amoral here, and they're a bit more domineering in terms of their wants of pursuing choices of flesh, in this case Riley. They're not afraid to take active measures to get her to continue playing the game, where the Cenobites in the 87 film were very much just passive viewers, essentially, and really only got involved once people opened the box or once someone tried to escape them. These Cenobites require a bit more active participation along with the box, because the box itself requires blood sacrifices in order to complete. 6 sides, 6 configurations, 6 sacrifices. Rather than just opening a puzzle box and having extra-dimensional sadomasochists show up to take you to hell, you have to make conscious choices this time. The box doesn't just open, it stabs you and drinks the blood, and then the Cenobites come to collect the victim who was stabbed, willing or unwilling. And the person holding the final configuration is granted an audience with Leviathan itself to be given a gift representative of one of the 6 different configurations of the box. And those configurations being each representative of its own metaphysical idea that is then given as a gift by the Cenobites in a way that is very in the vein of Hellraiser, in not at all what you'd expect. Pain is pleasure, pleasure is pain. There's a monkey's paw situation to basically every gift. There's the liminal configuration representative of sensation, which is the traditional Hellraiser experience, driving you beyond the limits of human sensation, where agony and pleasure become one, but not in the way you think, and certainly not for everyone, especially most humans who think they've, seen or felt it all. You haven't. There are the lore and the Lauderant configurations, which we don't see the consequences of either, but I would imagine the lore being representative of knowledge has something to do with, having your brain flooded with eldritch knowledge of hell and going crazy. Lauderant, I don't know. It's representative of love and passion, and I don't know how that would manifest, but I'm sure there are all sorts of twisted ways given the nature of pleasure and pain in this universe. There's the Lazarus configuration, representative of resurrection. Riley's tempted with this one in order to bring back her brother, and we don't see the result, but given her visions of Matt being a flayed corpse, I would imagine this is the experience that results in a Frank or Julia situation, returning from the dead, but needing blood in order to reconstitute yourself and continuing the cycle of suffering. There's the Leviathan configuration, representative of power, the power of dominance in the sovereignty of anguish, as Pinhead says, and the ultimate Cenobite gift, one which we see the full extent of in the final scene when Voight is presented with it and becomes a Cenobite in the process. That process being one of the most nightmarish presentations of cosmic horror I've seen in a very long time, but presented in such a way that is absolutely stunning and in the vein of Hellraiser, the final shot of which feels something right out of a Clive Barker painting. Agony beyond comprehension as you stare into the center of Leviathan itself and lose everything that makes you you, as your flesh and hair and everything are stripped away, and mentally and physically you become a mutilated alien mouthpiece for a big floating rhombus god in the sky. And lastly, you have the most famous, the lament configuration, the main form of the box, representative of life. Arguably the only way to win, but it's hardly a win. This is Riley's choice in deciding that she doesn't want any of the Cenobites' gifts, and as a result, she's still left with pain and punishment, just not the physical kind. Live your life with the mental anguish of knowing everything you did in order to get where you are, and all the people suffering in hell because of your actions. Riley's choice might have been the one of the least physical suffering, but it is hardly a story of redemption, and it's hardly a good, correct choice, because even not getting a twisted monkey's paw of a gift, Riley's choice is one of consequences. She learns her lesson, arguably in the easiest way possible given the circumstances, but she's not redeemed. She's burdened with the weight of everything she's done until she dies. It's fascinating seeing how the Cenobites respond to this too, because there's almost a sense of disrespect and disappointment. The speech that Pinhead gives in response to Riley not wanting their gifts feels genuinely spiteful. To the Cenobites, these things are gifts, and they want to give them out to those that they find interesting. And based on the priest's response to Riley deciding she doesn't want anything from them, the choice of lament almost feels like something that they look down upon. There's a tone of surprise to it.
You choose to live, to carry that weight, bitter and brief.
It really adds a whole level of insight to these things and the way they operate. They're fascinated by humanity, but they are truly so far beyond it that the notion of choosing to live a brief life free of physical pain but with mental anguish for the rest of your days seems like something that they are confused by and surprised by. And I love that. And I love this world. I love every aspect of this movie that Bruckner and his crew crafted to be a worthy successor to the Hellraiser films, or at least the first two Hellraiser films, but still tell its own story, is more faithful to the Hellbound Heart in some regards and less in others, but regardless manages to be an incredibly well put together reimagining of Hellraiser and the Cenobite world. And I honestly hope to God that we do see more of this franchise. I would love to see a sequel to this. I would love to see this story continue. I would love to see more of Jamie Clayton as the Hell Priest, and I can't wait to see where it goes from here. I hope David Bruckner comes back. I hope the whole crew comes back. This was a wild one. This is a really, really, really good remake, and one that is worthy of the name, and I could not be happier with it. I really can't. I'm genuinely so thrilled with it. I've seen it like twice now, and it has blown me away both times. Hellraiser is currently streaming on Hulu. If you haven't seen it, what are you doing? Why are you still watching this video when I've spoiled a big chunk of it? Click down there if you have seen it. Go over to Hulu and watch it. It's really, really good. David Bruckner, one of the best working horror directors. If you have seen Hellraiser, comment below, let me know what you thought of it. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts, especially if you're somebody like me who's read the books or is like a big fan of the franchise. Let me know what you thought of Jamie Clayton as the priest. Did she compare to Doug Bradley? Don't be bigoted assholes. I will delete any shitty comments, so yeah. But let me know what you thought of Hellraiser. I'm very excited to hear everyone's opinions on it, and I'm very excited to talk about it in more depth in the near future. And if you guys liked it, if you like this channel, if you like the stuff we put out, click down there, like, comment, subscribe. And there's a couple more movies coming up in the next few weeks I'm very excited to tackle with you all. And thank you for watching. I will see you all very soon.
What is it you pray for?